Good evening, I'm Bret. We're coming to you live tonight from the White House, one day after the end of the government shutdown and right in the middle of political sniping, maybe eventually open warfare between congressional Republicans and the nation's top law enforcement authorities. The Russia collusion investigation has now reached all the way into President Trump's cabinet. Attorney General Jeff Sessions spent several hours in an interview with special counsel Robert Mueller and his team. This comes as House and Senate Republicans on several different committees are raising serious questions to the FBI and the DOJ for what many see as unchecked bias and perhaps even a conspiracy against the president based on newly released text. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Mike Emanuel's on Capitol Hill with the growing animosity between those two groups. But we begin at our Washington bureau and Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge. Good evening, Catherine. Thank you,
Bret. On the same day, a Justice Department official confirmed the Attorney General's special counsel interview. New text messages suggest senior FBI investigators were skeptical the Russia probe would uncover any wrongdoing.
2 days after special counsel Robert Mueller took over the Russia probe in May, newly released text messages between demoted FBI agent Peter Strzok and reassigned lawyer Lisa Page suggest they discussed the merits of joining Mueller's team. Strzok writes, "You and I both know the odds are nothing. If I thought it was likely, I'd be there, no question. I hesitate in part because of my gut sense and concern there's no big there. On Fox, Republican lawmakers said the texts are more evidence of political bias.
But I care a lot about the Department of Justice and the FBI, and it breaks my heart that we are having to have this conversation about two agents that only wanted to get the president. They didn't have any interest in clearing him."
Another Republican who read the text said the FBI officials talk about a, quote, secret society within days of President Trump's victory.
There was a society of at least two people, to include Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, that had a desire to keep Donald Trump from becoming president, and then an expressed intent to work against him after he was elected president.
In a cryptic text, Strzok writes, "I personally have a sense of unfinished business. Unleashed it with MYE, or mid-year exam, the FBI's code name for the Clinton email case. Now I need to fix it and finish it." The FBI blames a technical problem for a 5-month gap in the Strzok Page texts and would not comment on whether the Bureau has taken physical custody of their phones to recover the messages.
It is no coincidence, in my opinion, that we're missing texts that run from when the Russia investigation was launched right up to the point where you have the Mueller investigation being launched.
Writing in a tweet, President Trump called the missing text one of the biggest stories in a long time. The Senate senior Democrat called out Republicans for undermining Mueller.
But he shouldn't be thwarted in any way, and the diversion that they're trying to do, both with Mueller and with others, is not good for the country.
In a separate development, President Trump said the White House had no advance notice of Attorney General Jeff Sessions' special counsel interview last week.
No, I didn't, but I'm not at all concerned.
The president also denied media reports that FBI Director Christopher Wray threatened to quit after pressure to remove his deputy Andrew McCabe, a longtime lieutenant of fired FBI Director James Comey.
He did not even a little bit. Nope. And he's going to do a good job.
Those close to the president tell Fox News they always expected Sessions would be interviewed, but they didn't know the timing. A White House spokesman said today that they were emphasizing transparency and their cooperation with the special counsel, Bret.
Catherine, thank you. There are growing communication issues between the law enforcement agencies and House Republicans. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel has that part of the story from Capitol Hill tonight.
We certainly support full transparency, and we believe that that's at the House Intel Committee to make that decision at this point.
Republican sources say there's increasing anger and frustration among GOP members of the House Intelligence Committee with the FBI and the Department of Justice. Some have suggested the Bureau and DOJ have been stonewalling on the committee's requests for documents, text messages, and other information.
It's been tough. I mean, we've been trying for months now to get the department to give us access to this information.
Intelligence Committee Republicans are expected to vote in the next couple of weeks to make public a 4-page classified memo detailing improper activity by some at the FBI, including surveillance abuses.
We also have to do our oversight responsibility with regard to the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and in doing that, we have uncovered very serious concerns.
If approved, it would be sent to President Trump, who would have 5 days to say whether he has any objection to its release.
It was deeply disturbing, as anybody who's been in law enforcement and any American will find out once they have the opportunity to review it.
FBI spokesman Andrew Ames told Fox, quote, "The FBI has requested to receive a copy of the memo in order to evaluate the information and take appropriate steps if necessary. To date, the request has been declined." Another strain between congressional investigators and the FBI is over the Steele dossier. Lawmakers have complained that the FBI has obstructed their efforts to get at how the Bureau used the dossier. It is a 35-page collection of memos written by Christopher Steele, a former British intelligence agent during the 2016 presidential campaign, which suggested a conspiracy between the Russian government to help Donald Trump defeat Hillary Clinton. That's why Gowdy says people should see his memo.
People are going to be troubled, but what you won't hear me do is talk about prison and people going to jail. That's part of what we don't want. We don't want people making decisions based on a 4-page memo.
A Justice Department official says DOJ and the FBI have been instructed to turn over all appropriate documents and texts as quickly as possible. Fox is told that includes more than 1,000 pages of classified documents so far. Bret?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thanks. A lot of coverage of this today on all sides. Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson, the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, released those text messages today. Tonight, along with Senator Chuck Grassley, Johnson has sent a letter to the Justice Department's internal watchdog asking some very pointed questions. Senator Johnson joins us now from Capitol Hill to tell us what they are. Senator, thanks for being here.
Well, Bret, how you doing?
What are you looking for?
Well, we want more information. We want to know exactly, why those text messages were missing for 5 months. Exactly how that, how they save that information, where it's saved to. We're sending out letters to preserve records to the private sector people that store those things, Google, certainly the Verizon, the telephone company. So this is all about making sure that whatever information's out there is preserved and that eventually the American people understand exactly what happened inside the highest levels of the FBI.
So when the DOJ sent you this letter saying that there was this glitch that prevented those 5 months of text from being released to you, did you buy it? Do you buy it?
Well, I'm suspicious. I want to get to the bottom of it. And there's so many experts in IT that say that those messages are somewhere and they need to be retrieved. We need to see it because the timing is very suspicious. From mid-December of 2016 after the election till the day that Robert Mueller was actually appointed, and then those texts that Catherine Herridge was referring to occurred 2 days later when Strzok and Page were kind of talking about their careers, and I think really considering whether or not they want to join Mueller's investigation. And the conclusion, one of the reasons they were reluctant to do so, and that's according to Peter Strzok, is because his gut sense was that there's no big there. We've gone through, this nation's been, dragged through this investigation so far. No conclusions yet. And one of the lead investigators, one of the deputy assistant director of the counterintelligence division that had probably been working on this for those 5 months when those texts have gone missing, is saying that his concern is, his gut sense is there's no big there. I think that's pretty jaw-dropping.
All right. Well, when pressed about this, the Senate Minority Leader today said that this is all of it, the memo and this, a part of a distraction effort by Republicans to take away from the Mueller investigation. Take a listen.
I think there has been a great deal of activity on the other side intending to either divert attention from Mueller or even stand in his way. I don't think that Mr. Nunes has played a constructive role, to say the least, and we're all worried about it. Mueller has to be allowed to do his job.
Your thoughts on that?
Well, from my standpoint, this is under my committee's jurisdiction, federal records. And we were involved in the Hillary Clinton investigation. And I've been saying for a year and a half after former Director Comey granted immunity to Cheryl Mills on June 10th, and then on June 27th, Bill Clinton met with Loretta Lynch. And then on July 1st, Loretta Lynch announced that, well, she's going to let Director Comey make that call. And yet, in these texts that just got released, we find out that she already knew that Director Comey wasn't going to press charges. So
yeah, let me read that one. That is text number 4. Holy cow, New York Times breaking Apuzzo. Lynch will accept whatever Rec D, that's Comey, and career prosecutors make no political appointee input. Strzok says Lynch, timing not great, but whatever. Wonder if that's why no coordination language added. No way. This is a purposeful leak following the airplane snafu. And yes, I think we had some warning of it. I know they sent some statement to Rybicki because he called Andy. That's McCabe. And yeah, it's a real profile in courage since she knows no charges will be brought. That's what you're referencing.
So top officials in the FBI knew that Loretta Lynch knew before she said that she was going to let Comey decide that he wasn't going to prosecute. He wasn't going to press charges at all. And then Comey later testified that there was no coordination between the Department of Justice, Loretta Lynch, and the FBI. So that is coming into question. So what this is all about is further evidence of corruption, more than bias, but corruption at the highest levels of the FBI and that secret society. We have an informant that's talking about a group that were holding secret meetings off-site. There's so much smoke here. There's so much suspicion.
Let's stop there. A secret society, secret meetings off-site of the Justice Department.
Correct.
And you have an informant saying that?
Yes.
Is there anything more about that?
No, we have to dig into it. This is not a distraction. Again, this is bias, potentially corruption at the highest levels of the FBI that is now investigating. And now and by the way, Robert Mueller used to run the FBI. He is in no position to do an investigation over this kind of misconduct. So I think at this point in time, we probably should be looking at a special counsel to undertake this investigation, but Congress is going to have to continue to dig.
Do you think that Attorney General Sessions, in his current capacity, which he has taken himself out of the Russia investigation and overseeing Mueller, has the ability to call for another special prosecutor to analyze this part of the investigation?
I really don't know, but when you see this kind of bias, this kind of corruption in the FBI, you have to ask the question, are there similar individuals, highly biased political operatives, burrowed into the Department of Justice as well? I mean, does Attorney General Sessions really have a department he can rely on and trust as well? So no, this is deeply concerning, and we're going to continue to dig.
And do you have any problem on the reports that Sessions put some pressure on the FBI Director Wray to fire the Deputy Director McCabe, that was coming from the president? He denied that today, but do you believe that to be true?
Well, the Attorney General is in charge of that department, and if he's got concern about people under his command that are not doing their job, or that have this enormous political bias, as we certainly have seen with Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, that would be his responsibility, his right to terminate those employees.
Well, Senator, as you get more information, you're welcome back here anytime.
Thanks a lot, Brett.
Thank you. Here at the White House tonight, new examples of President Trump's America First economic and trade policy. The U.S. is slapping tariffs on imports of 2 products. And the makers of those products, you can imagine, are not happy. Correspondent Kevin Cork reports and joins me here on the North Lawn with the story. Good evening, Kevin.
Hey, good evening, my friend. It's very interesting. This is the president's first major move to level the global playing field, which he has long suggested has been tilted against American companies. But he's getting ready to take a trip to a major economic summit in Europe, as you know, where his America First policies will likely be at odds with global political and business leaders.
Our companies have been decimated, and those companies are going to be coming back strong.
It was a move that could be best summed up in 2 words: America First. President Trump today signing a pair of executive orders calling for stiff tariffs on imported solar panels and washing machines.
Our companies will not be taken advantage of anymore, and our workers are going to have lots of really great jobs with products that are going to be made in the good old USA.
The president's directive calls for penalties of up to 50% on washing machines, as well as restrictive quotas to limit the number that come into the U.S. market, though the penalties would phase out over time. A direct response to U.S. industry pleas for help to stem the tide of a recent flood of cheap imports, which led U.S. appliance giant Whirlpool to file a petition for relief from South Korean appliance manufacturers Samsung and LG. China, which dominates the solar panel manufacturing industry, expressed, quote, strong dissatisfaction today, calling the U.S. decision an abuse of trade remedy measures. The Trump trade barriers come by way of a 1974 law that permits companies to seek relief if they can prove serious injury from a sudden surge in imports. Said U.S. Trade Rep Robert Lighthizer, the Trump administration will always defend American workers, farmers, ranchers, and businesses. However, targeting imported goods like washing machines, for example, is often complicated by the fact that many of the parts used to create the items are American-made. This as the president prepares to travel to the World Economic Forum in Davos, first U.S. president to attend since Bill Clinton. Experts warn the president's penchant for aggressive trade policies could overshadow the gathering.
It's just really a harbinger of things to come, and the president has a number of upcoming decisions on steel, aluminum, Chinese intellectual property theft that could really tie things up.
But the president's chief economic advisor doesn't seem concerned.
The president believes we can have truly win-win agreements. America first is not America alone.
Very interesting to listen to Gary Cohn there. By the way, a bit of pushback tonight from a usually reliable ally. You may remember South Carolina's governor, Henry McMaster, an early proponent of the president's campaign back in 2016, and whose state, by the way, has recently opened a $380 million Samsung facility, is calling the president's decision, Bret, to impose these stiff tariffs on imported washing machines a bad decision, but likely one we'll see more of in the months ahead.
Interesting, and it'll be tested there in Davos.
Indeed.
Kevin, thank you. Well, the remaining 11 countries in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, have revised their agreement in the wake of the U.S. withdrawal. The leaders of Canada and India came out forcefully against a drift toward protectionism, they said, in the global economy today. President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the TPP right after his inauguration. We'll talk with the White House Legislative Director here in just minutes. Up next, the Secretary of State says Russia is to blame for the use of chemical weapons in Syria. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. WDRB in Louisville as a shooting at a high school in southwest Kentucky leaves 2 students dead and 17 others wounded. The 15-year-old suspect was taken into custody. The state police commissioner says the boy will be charged with murder and attempted murder. KHON in Honolulu as an earthquake in the Gulf of Alaska triggers a brief tsunami watch in Hawaii and all along the U.S. West Coast. The quake was measured at magnitude 7.9. 11 minutes later, that tsunami watch was issued for Hawaii. It was canceled about an hour and a half later after that. And this is a live look at Orlando from our affiliate, Fox 35. One of the big stories there tonight, astronauts from the International Space Station take a spacewalk to install a new mechanical hand on the facility's big robot arm. The first of 2 original hands on the Canadian-built arm was replaced last October. Work on this one will be completed next week. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We're at the White House tonight. We'll be right back.
Do you know which investment could be your best?
Special report live at the White House tonight. We're learning tonight that multiple Americans are among the dead from the weekend terror attack at a hotel in Kabul, Afghanistan. The State Department is not saying who or how many were killed or injured. Afghan officials say 14 foreigners were among the 22 fatalities. They say all 6 Taliban militants who stormed that hotel were killed. The Pentagon is moving a dozen of its A-10 Thunderbolt jets to Afghanistan to provide close air support for American and Afghan troops. The newly arrived planes flew their first combat missions in Afghanistan less than 24 hours after arriving at Kandahar Airfield last Friday. The jets are part of the 303rd Expeditionary Fighter Squadron from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. Last weekend's partial government shutdown did not stop the Pentagon from killing 150 ISIS fighters in an airstrike in eastern Syria Saturday. The attack targeted one of the last remaining pockets of ISIS control near the border between Syria and Iraq. Top U.S. military officials believe ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is hiding somewhere in that area. Meantime, America's top diplomat is calling out Russia over chemical weapons use in Syria. This comes as the administration tries to keep fighting between 2 groups considered friendly to the U.S., the Turkish military and Syrian Kurdish militia, from escalating. Correspondent Benjamin Hall has the latest tonight.
Two U.S. allies face off after Turkey launched a major offensive against U.S.-backed Kurds in northwest Syria. The assault, called Operation Olive Branch, aims to push back Kurdish groups from the Turkish border. Over 300,000 civilians are now at risk as the fighting intensifies. On a tour of Europe, Secretary Tillerson said he understood Turkey's border concerns, but the focus should remain on ISIS.
We're engaged with Turkey, and we are engaged also with the leadership of our coalition, and are asking that both sides show restraint.
But Turkey's president has vowed to crush the Kurdish militias, which he says are terrorists, and he called for America to join him.
Why are you fighting ISIS with another terrorist organization? Come do this with your strategic partner, Turkey.
If Turkish forces now move east from Afrin, they would come into direct contact with U.S. forces and U.S.-trained Kurdish groups, who are widely credited with helping defeat ISIS, pitting two U.S. allies against each other. In the rebel-held district of Ghouta, outside Damascus, the Assad regime has been accused of using chemical weapons again, after 20 civilians, mostly children, were victims of a chlorine attack. Secretary Tillerson, now in France, pointed the finger at Russia.
Russia ultimately bears responsibility for the victims in East Ghouta and countless other Syrians targeted with chemical weapons since Russia became involved in Syria.
One concern now is that as Turkey push back the Kurds, they may look to Russia rather than the US to achieve their strategic goals in Syria. When ISIS was strong, there was a wide coalition of groups and countries who all came together to counter the threat. But now they're being defeated, many of those same groups and countries are turning on each other to take advantage of the vacuum. Bret?
Benjamin Hall in London. Benjamin, thanks. Up next, the White House Legislative Affairs. Welcome back to Special Report, coming to you live tonight from the White House. The president's pick to chair the Federal Reserve has won Senate approval. Senators voted 85-12 to confirm Jerome Powell to lead the nation's central bank. Stocks were mixed today. The Dow dropped 4. The S&P 500 was up 6. The Nasdaq gained 52. Federal employees were back at work today after the brief 3-day government shutdown. But the big question tonight is, for how long? The short-term spending bill expires in less than 3 weeks. Let's get the lay of the land from the President's Legislative Affairs Director, Mark Short, here on the North Lawn. Mark, thanks for being here.
Bret, thanks for
having us. Listen, this is now, you're over this hump. The White House signaled that this was a win in your eyes, but you have much more negotiating to do in less than 3 weeks.
You're right, and complicating that factor is the reality we have a State of the Union speech and Democrat and Republican retreats. So the number of days that Congress is going to be here is pretty limited. So we have a lot to do. We certainly hope the Democrats don't repeat the effort of shutting down the government. I think their position right now, Bret, is that in order to get a spending bill, we need a budget cap deal, and we're pretty close on that. But the Democrat position has been that we're not going to agree to a budget cap deal until we get DACA legislation passed. And that, I think, is what's always been befuddling to us, because we're making progress on DACA, but you're basically holding Americans hostage over a separate issue.
The DACA issue comes with border security. You have to have it, according to the White House, according to the 4 pillars.
Right.
The Senate Majority Leader today said he's pulling the deal that he put on the table for a border wall. Here's Senator Schumer today.
Our Republican leaders don't want to go ahead on their own. They're afraid of President Trump. They want to know what he'll do, but he doesn't tell them to do anything, and he usually tells them, you do it yourselves. We get paralysis. We're very pleased with how things came out. We're a lot better off today when it comes to the cause of Dreamers than we were 4 or 5 days ago. We've gotten a commitment from Senator McConnell, trust but verify, but he made it not just to Democrats, but to a good chunk of his own caucus.
So your thoughts on that?
Well, it seems like negotiating with Leader Schumer is like negotiating with Jell-O. One day he's for the border wall, the next day he's against it. I think the reality is that we're going to eventually get a deal here, Bret. We do want the 4 pillars because we don't want to be back in the same place again where we were before. The reality is that we need a physical barrier. We also, though, need an end to chain migration and the visa lottery. And we're happy to negotiate on that DACA population. We've moved about, and they've asked us to consider beyond the 690,000 permit holders to say, would you consider those that we think were in the shadows and afraid to come out? And we've said, yes, we'll consider that. So we've shown a willingness to negotiate. They've shown a willingness to negotiate. We're going to get a deal.
So on the number, is it 1.6 billion? Is it 20 billion? What is the number that you need appropriated for a wall, not just committed?
So the Department of Homeland Security and the Customs and Border Patrol agents who are on the front line put together a plan submitted to Congress that is roughly about $20 billion for the fiscal barrier. It's $33 billion in all when you include the technology and other elements. Keep in mind that Democrats just a few years ago authorized $40 billion for border security. So they've been shown a willingness to go that far. But the game that's always played here in Washington, Bret, is they authorize dollars without appropriating it. We want to make sure that this isn't something that people vote on and say, yeah, one day we'll give you the money and never really do it. We want to make sure the dollars are there so we can continue constructing the wall.
But in between 1.6 and 20, you can move?
Absolutely. I mean, the 1.6 was for just this fiscal year, exactly. So the roughly $20 billion was over 7 years is what Customs and Border Patrol estimated it would take them to fill the gaps where they're seeing the greatest drug interdiction and the greatest number of people coming across the border.
I guess the biggest question is on chain migration. And what happens with that? What does this pillar need to look like from a negotiating point of view?
So in our minds, we want to make sure that nuclear families are continuing to be protected, and so spouses and children. But I think what's happened over time is that you've seen it abused by the process, where you end up having 10, 15, 20 family members coming in on one person's visa. We saw this year the 2 terror attacks, I should say, in 2017. One, the pipe bomb, one, the individual who ran over Americans in a truck. One came in via lottery, one came in via chain migration. We think these are vulnerabilities that people are looking to do harm to our country can exploit.
You heard Senator Schumer there. Some Republicans even said they didn't know where President Trump was on some of these issues when the negotiating was going on. You mentioned the State of the Union. Will there be markers in the State of the Union that the president's going to lay down and say, here's what I need, get this, and we'll have a deal?
Yes, I think you'll hear the president talk about that in the State of the Union, Bret, but I would say that we have been pretty clear. We sent to Congress when Secretary Kelly, at the time DHS Secretary, went to Congress and said we need this problem solved. We put out our parameters of what we want. Back in September, we gave a long list of priorities, say these are the things we're looking for as part of the DACA solution. We came back about 4 weeks ago and said here's more refining on the 4 pillars that you mentioned on DACA, border security, chain migration, visa lottery. Very, very clear. In 4 pages, we laid out what our priorities were. So we've provided that to Congress. I know people want to hide behind it and say we haven't been clear. The reality is the White House has been crystal clear on what we're asking. We're going to continue to push forward to that, and you'll see the president message more of that State of the Union.
And do you think he is going to be more involved than he was, or the same?
Bret, he's been incredibly engaged in this. We've had, as you saw about 10 days ago, we had 20 members of Congress, bicameral, bilateral, over here to discuss what the path forward is. And I think that the president will continue to have members. He wants to have the conversation. He wants to get to a solution. What came out of that was agreement that the deputies, meaning Kevin McCarthy, John Cornyn, Steny Hoyer, and Dick Durbin, would be the ones that we'd have a working group with. And now that we've opened the government, we said we'd be happy to begin those negotiations again.
And like he said in that meeting, is he willing to take the heat from the right side of his party if the deal is the deal?
Absolutely he is. If the deal is what enables us to provide security on our border and prevent future vulnerabilities, absolutely he will.
Mark, thanks for the time.
Thanks, Bret. Thanks for having me on.
When we come back, a veterans group wants to encourage everybody at the Super Bowl to stand for the national anthem. So why is the NFL saying no?
Liberty Mutual
Super Bowl is coming a week from Sunday. Super Bowl 52. New England and Philadelphia will play on the field. But there's another battle taking place involving the NFL, veterans, and the national anthem. Fox News media analyst and host of Fox's Media Buzz, Howard Kurtz, fills us in.
It's been a tough season for the NFL, with sinking ratings and constant controversy over protesting players who kneel during the national anthem. And that controversy is now casting a shadow on the league's premier showcase, the Super Bowl. The NFL has rejected a $30,000 print ad from a veterans group for the game's program that addressed the issue with these 2 words: please stand. AmVets, founded by World War II veterans, had already modified the wording at the request of the company handling the program, but the league has final say. And AmVets now accuses the NFL of corporate censorship.
The NFL, bottom line, just denied us our opportunity for free speech.
An NFL spokesman said the big game has never been a place for advertising that could be considered by some as a political statement. He said the Super Bowl will salute alternative wording. Please honor our veterans, but the group didn't respond in time.
We didn't place this ad, please stand, for any political reason whatsoever. It was our way of just getting the American public to stand in their beliefs.
President Trump kicked off a season of controversy by tweeting about the kneeling players and personally denouncing them.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now?
The NFL naturally wants today's focus on the Patriots and the Eagles, not political ads. But since any on-field protest will draw huge media coverage, the league does seem to be blocking the other side's message. Bret?
Howie, thanks. Pennsylvania's highest court is ordering state lawmakers to redraw congressional districts next month ahead of this fall's midterm elections. Correspondent Doug McElway tells us tonight it is just the latest salvo in an ongoing war over where politicians can and should draw the line.
Change has come to America.
It was on election night, 2008, having lost the White House and both houses of Congress, that Republicans began a long-term plan to regain power. The first step was to redraw or gerrymander congressional districts, a power that 37 out of 50 state legislatures directly hold. It worked. Today, Republicans control 32 state legislatures and both houses of Congress.
The problem over time is that the science of data, the science of voter identification have made both parties too good at doing it.
Districts have been drawn in contorted ways that maximize the incumbent's chances of winning. Goofy kicking Donald Duck is one description of Pennsylvania's Republican-held 7th District. Observers say North Carolina's 12th District, straddling Interstate 85, is so narrow you could open your car doors and kill everybody in it. Democrats are hardly immune. Maryland's reliably Democratic 3rd District has been described as among the most gerrymandered in the country.
Both Republicans and Democrats have asked the court to find that overly manipulated districts that benefit one party or the other are unconstitutional.
It's not an easy question for the High Court, which could hear as many as 5 gerrymandering challenges this term.
How do you know when something is just a district and when something crosses the line into an unlawful partisan gerrymander?
In recent arguments, the court appeared divided over Wisconsin's map. Justice Ginsburg asking, quote, if you can stack a legislature in this way, what incentive is there for a voter to exercise his vote? Justice Gorsuch countering, quote, are we supposed to actually specify a uniform standard? Analysts say Democrats aren't waiting for a favorable decision.
Losing almost 1,000 seats in the House, the Senate, gubernatorial level, state legislature level over the 8 years of the Obama administration, that's going to take a long time to repair.
To that end, former Attorney General Eric Holder and President Obama have joined to form the National Democratic Redistricting Committee to do at the grassroots level in 2018 and 2020 what the Republicans did in 2008. Bret?
Doug, thank you. Was there a secret society of Justice Department officials plotting against President Trump? And what did the Attorney General tell the special counsel, Mueller? The panel discusses the missing FBI texts, the investigation, when we come back.
No, I'm not at all concerned.
Did you talk to him about it?
No, I didn't, but I'm not at all concerned. Thank you all very much.
Everyone, just exit. Thank you, Kristen. Thanks, Kristen.
No, he didn't at all.
He did not.
He did not even a little bit. Nope. And he's going to do a good job.
The president said today that Director Wray did not threaten to resign. How does he know that?
I guess that would be based on conversations that he would have had with Director Wray.
Does he think there needs to be a staff shakeup at the FBI?
Look, we have 100% confidence in Director Wray, and if anybody is going to make that decision, it'll be the director, and we're going to leave that in his hands to decide whether or not he feels that there need to be changes made.
Not even a little bit, the president said in the Oval Office today about the FBI director threatening to resign. That comes from an Axios piece, which from Jonathan Swan last night. FBI director threatened to resign amid Trump Sessions pressure. Also comes as we learn that the Attorney General and the former FBI director, Jeff Sessions, and Jim Comey, both interviewed and talked with Special Counsel Mueller, Sessions in recent days, Comey last year. The New York Times on the Comey interview. The interview with Mr. Comey focused on a series of memos he wrote about his interactions with Mr. Trump that unnerved Mr. Comey. Mueller obviously following the collusion investigation and possibly obstruction of justice, but this all is released and comes out on a day in which these text messages between FBI agents basically dealing with the investigation are really raising some eyebrows on Capitol Hill. Let's bring in our panel. In our Washington bureau, Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard, Charles Hurt, opinion editor for the Washington Times, and with me here at the White House, Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio. All right, first to the Sessions interview. The president says he's not worried about it, but 5 hours potentially is what we're hearing. That's a long
time.
Yeah.
That's a long time, and it sounds like Mueller's pretty interested in the possibilities of obstruction. What did Comey think about his conversations with the president? Did Sessions know anything about the circumstances surrounding Comey's firing? And we know, remember, that when Sessions testified before Congress, he didn't remember a lot of things. Yeah. He said over and over again, I didn't recall this, I didn't recall that. So maybe Mueller wants to refresh his memory.
Charlie, what about the timing on all of this? Take a listen to Senator Johnson about this investigation, about the text messages and all that's coming out just in the past couple of days.
That secret society, we have an informant that's talking about a group that were holding secret meetings off-site. There's so much smoke here. There's so much suspicion.
Let's stop there. A secret society, secret meetings off-site of the Justice Department.
Correct.
And you have an informant saying that?
Yes.
Is there anything more about that?
No, we have to dig into it.
Has to dig into it, Charlie, but obviously this investigation and the fact that you have 5 months of these text messages missing is raising red flags up on the Hill.
Yeah, I mean, it's to the point that it truly strains credulity. And especially when you have things like that text message about the secret society, and then before that the text message about needing an insurance plan in case the unlikely event that Donald Trump actually wins. There are some really strange things going on here. A lot of unbelievable questions that need to be answered. And what's kind of most alarming about it is that the questions don't seem to be getting answered right now. And you have the DOJ, you have the FBI. They are answerable to Congress. They're answerable to the White House, at least to some degree. And even in that situation, they're not getting the questions answered, and it's very disturbing. And I think that when somebody like Trey Gowdy talks about how we're not even talking at this point about anybody going to jail or anything like that. I don't know why he would say something like that. I get it. I want all this to end. I want all of this not to have happened. But some seriously screwed up things have happened, and we need to get to the bottom of all of it. And I hope people at the FBI and DOJ who are culpable for some of this are terrified.
Steve.
Well, I think Trey Gowdy is somebody who usually waits for the evidence to draw his conclusions. I suspect that's what he was doing with that comment. But it's telling to me that Trey Gowdy has been as outspoken as he has about these recent revelations. He has been sort of a sober-minded judge on these matters and has given every benefit of the doubt to the FBI and to the Mueller investigation that he possibly could. But these things are troubling. The sort of continued bias that we've seen through these text messages has to be troubling to anybody who believes in the fair application of the law. And if you look at the kinds of things that have emerged in the past couple of days and then marry them with what we had learned before, it's very clear that these were not just the private views of this couple having an affair. There was discussion about taking those private views and acting upon them in the public service, in the duty that Peter Strzok had as a public servant. That is where you have, I think, real problems, and this begs for additional questions to be answered by the FBI, by the DOJ, by those two in particular. These are real questions. This is a legitimate, substantive issue.
Here's Representative Ratcliffe and Representative Trey Gowdy.
When you look at these texts in the aggregate, it shows more than just an extreme level of intense bias and hatred against Donald Trump and for Hillary Clinton. It shows a manifest intent to act upon that bias.
What's also troubling to me is this text that Johnny Ratcliffe found last night about this secret society. Now, I have no clue what that means because that was not the phraseology I used, but it's the day after the election, and it's the same two people that were discussing a little bit later in the text the damage they had done with the Clinton investigation and how they could, quote, fix it and make it right.
Listen, Mara, we don't know what we don't know about the Mueller investigation. I say that all the time, but it's true. But this doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good, and I'm sure it's going to be investigated. Eventually, we're going to see all the emails that still exist. But there's also something else going on here, which is, first of all, the
text messages.
The text message, that's what I meant. The text messages got emails on the brain. The guy who wrote them was removed by Mueller as soon as he learned about this in the summer. And a lot of this is part of undermining Mueller's investigation, making it look like it's just a partisan witch hunt, so that whatever he comes up with can be easily dismissed.
But you don't have concerns about the substance of what they're saying?
Yes, I do have concerns about the substance, but I think the reason that a lot of Republicans are harping on this is because they want to make sure that when Mueller finally does finish his report, that they can say this was just partisan. I think as a long-term strategy, not a good idea to undermine the Department of Justice and the FBI.
All right, Charlie, your response to that?
Yeah, I don't think that any Republicans on over in Congress are going to stick their neck out to protect this president. If in any sort of unjust way. That's kind of strikes me as absurd. I think that I do think that these issues are it's shocking, and I think that the people's outrage in Congress is very much well founded. And when you stop back and you look at the whole Trump election in the first place, these are all the reasons why so many people came out for Trump in the first place. It's not that he was a perfect person or a perfect candidate or a perfect whatever. It was that he was going to come in here and drain the swamp, or whatever phrase you want to use. This just sort of proves all of that stuff. It's not only as bad as he said it was, it was even worse than he said it was.
And Steve, quickly, on the other front is this Nunes memo, which is 4 pages, boiled down from, I think, thousands of pages, dealing with FISA and what is believed to be allegations of serious abuse in FISA warrants. We don't know when and if that's going to come out, but Democrats push back and say this is a distillation by Republicans. It seems like the text messages right now are crossing more of a bipartisan concern than the memo itself.
Well, that's true, and I think Democrats and many in the media are skeptical because there's been this concerted effort to get that memo released. But it's interesting to me that Democrats are primarily challenging Devin Nunes on process rather than on the substance of what his memo says. Now, maybe that's because some of the memo is still classified and they feel like they can't talk about it. But I would think that if there were a substantive attack to be made, I mean, Adam Schiff is no weak-kneed attack dog. He likes to go after Devin Nunes. He's done a lot of that over the course of these investigations. One suspects that if there were a more substantive attack or way of discrediting it, that he might be leveling it.
And 10 seconds. It seems like the White House is inclined to
release it, and I think it will be released.
Okay. Panel, thank you. When we come back, if you laughed at that